Hello team, it's time for the Daily Detangler. All right, I thought I'd take some time and talk a little bit about what I'm seeing with regard to where tangles come from, because I've been using this approach to try to sort through my inputs I'm getting. And obviously there's a lot going on. There's a lot of inputs from a lot of different sources. There is a lot in flight. There's not enough time to do what we need to do. There's not enough certainty. There's not enough, um, structure that I provide others, right? There's things that I need to do to be more VUCA ready. And there's also a need to detangle myself. And I've talked a lot about that in the context of doing detanglers. So what I thought I would do is share where I'm learning where I'm learning tangles come from, and also give some examples about how I've been detangling. So a lot of the source of challenges in interpersonal work or knowledge work stems from what we're doing and the nature of what we're doing. And I have to remind myself that what we're doing is something that not a lot of people take on. We could probably get the number of people who've taken this on into a single airplane, maybe, or a single hotel. I mean, it's not huge numbers. And then at the same time, there is a known challenge, and that challenge has to do with the ecosystem that we're trying to address. And that ecosystem challenge creates a lot of symptoms. And that ecosystem challenge in this case is this idea of we're shifting in a digital transformation, digitally driven economy, experience economy. Customers are complex, our companies are complex, and sales teams are stuck in the middle with regard to communicating value. That structure that when you drill down to that, and we've given it an identity of shifting from go to market to go to customer. And I like starting here because I remind myself that even though in the day-to-day in minutia of doing what I'm doing, that really this is the source of change. This is the why we are doing what we're doing. And there are a lot of challenges even in understanding what this is, and let alone why it's important. I think there's a lot on the surface, but when you drill down into it as we do, boy, there's a lot of challenges there. And I've seen and gone through a lot of these for many, many years. So I like to set this as the frame of what we're doing and why this is so hard. It gives me license to engage in, boy, this is hard and not a lot of people are doing it. And at the same time, there's an economic impact to what we're doing, because if we can change and help customers change and help catalysts drive change to go to customer, there is a lot of upside to that. So not only are we on a quest, we're on a righteous quest to change. However, just in that opening piece, not everybody's on the bus with that. Right, not everybody across commercial entities are on the board with how to go about that, or why that's important, or what that is. And that creates a lot of challenges that we engage in. The proof is there. Customers don't see the value in the conversations that salespeople have. We use salespeople as the reason or the focal point, because sales conversations are where the bulk of value is communicated. And salespeople today, especially today, represent the value of their company. And markets don't write checks, people do. Salespeople have to navigate that. And these are the top 10 facts about executive level buying. Customers don't want to buy, they want the outcome. Customers need to know how to figure out how to succeed. Their problems cut across organizational silos. They have to navigate internal agreement networks. They are risk averse. They don't dictate. They need buy-in. The funding is spread across budgets. Driving adoption is critical. we have to teach them how to work, and there are more detractors for change than supporters. The bottom line is the few companies prepare salespeople for these realities. And this is exactly the challenge that I face on a daily basis in navigating what we're doing, right? We are trying to model the reality of this, and this exists in spades, and just how we're set up, what we're asked to do, how we're going about it, and also the conversations that Catalyst has. So in this idea of what's happening, what am I observing, right? What am I personally observing, and how am I helping? This is a tangle, or a source of possible frustration or anxiety, right? I want to help this. I think a lot of people want to help this, and a lot of people want to help. So how are we going to help? How are we going to help? How are we going to help? And how do we create an impact? How do we create an impact? How is this going to work? What can we do? Right. And this type of approach and that type of thinking with well-intentioned people wanting to help creates accidental symptoms that called productitis. We call it productitis because it's a hidden disease. And we can diagnose productitis. We can observe productitis. We can have the discussion about productitis. And just in this chart, there's a lot to unpack, and there's a lot of perspectives that come into play on what to do about this and how to go about it, and why it's even critical. And that creates a lot of a need to communicate, and communicate not only in between everybody, but among everybody. And that's the same challenge that salespeople have. How do you communicate? How do you get alignment? How do you collaborate? This is an interpersonal challenge. So how do we tackle that? Well, one of the things that we've done is done the work to think about why productitis exists, and we've observed a lot of phenomenon there. And what leads to that confusion. We start unwinding that ecosystem view and structuring that ecosystem view with an approach called, aligning to the go-to-customer approach called message, messenger, and audience. And the reason why we do that is because this is a communication process. So there's a lot of observations that we make about messages. There's a lot of observations we make about messengers and the skills they need, and a lot of observations that we make about the audience that customers and salespeople need to navigate to, which means, from our perspective as a team, we're doing the same thing. What messages are we creating? How am I doing as a messenger? Who am I messaging to, right? So this is my reality as well. And I get confused too. And what is valuable? And how do I create that kind of value? So how do I operate in a way that isn't productitis driven? How do I get clear? How do I add the right type of structure, the right type of information, to the right people at the right time, et cetera? Well, we've structured that out, the message, messenger, audience view, into this value communication process. And that value communication process is repeatable, and we use that as a structure. So as we continue to drill down from the broad view in, we run into, and I personally run into, okay, that all makes sense, but what do I do? 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 What do I do today? I got these inputs, and these are strategic inputs. So now what? And there's this tension between the designing what we need to do and enabling what we need to do. There's this tension around doing things right and doing those right things, doing things right and doing the right things. And this blend of strategy and tactics comes together in what we call stratocution. It's a real thing. Stratocution exists. It's this balancing act between these two. It's this balancing act between design and design and architecture and operational execution and getting things right. So that tension exists, and that's because of the ecosystem challenge. And at some point, you have to blend both in order to execute well. And that's what stratocution helps us do. Between companies and between people becomes the mixing pot, becomes the space in which we operate, which I operate. So that is not easy, right? So what does that look like, and how do we help with that, and what kind of conversations are we having? And this is the same challenge that salespeople have. So when you continue to drill down into that, the top down, do the right things is one lens, and top and bottom up is another lens. We call this operating with a bifocal lens. Operating with that bifocal lens is doing the right things today so we can accomplish objectives tomorrow. And this becomes a challenge to walk in a daily basis for me. How do I do the right things now with the inputs I have and take action now, but in service of the broader outcome, right? So if I continue to unpack that, it's working backwards from strategy and working forwards and doing the right thing, which is where orchestration comes from. Orchestration is this idea of blending people, process, information, and technology to do both at the same time so that we can execute. In the context of, going to customer and changing how we communicate value and bringing together message, messenger, and audience, it's this idea of what are we doing between companies to mine strategic accounts, and what are we doing between people to unlock their value, right? And to get the best value from everyone. Well, we tackle these two things at the same time in what we're doing. And this is the source of a lot of challenges that I have. We have to tackle, and I have to tackle and think through what's happening in the bigger picture and what's happening between people. And luckily, we're set up that Catalyst is in the top layer, and he navigates, and all we have to do is help him be successful in that. So we simplified the top layer, and now we just have to execute. So what are we executing? Well, between companies, it's about model, map, match. This is an approach we take. How do we model the customer? How do we map our capabilities, and how do we match? Well, the same thing applies to me. How am I modeling, with the reality? How am I observing it? What am I learning about what I'm mapping? And then what am I creating, right? What am I bringing into the match to help tackle this out? And how are people plugging into this, right? So that's the challenge of communicating value between companies. But there's also a challenge in communicating value between people, and we use the communication model for that, encode, transmit, decode. And encode, transmit, decode is on our scientific methods site. So now we're down at the between people level. How is this happening? What am I doing to encode? What am I doing to transmit? And what am I doing to decode? So what I've done is I've started at the macro level, and I've gone to a micro level. The reason why I wanted to do that was to think through and help me get detangled. I got inputs yesterday from Catalyst on, hey, here's this, here's that. There's a lot of inputs coming. We've got this going on with Mimecast, right? These are top-down inputs. Then I have my, hey, I'm trying to make a daily detangler. What the heck should I do with that? And this tension between understanding the right things, what and why we're doing it, and bringing it together into taking action today. How am I going to get detangled with that? And I get aggravated and frustrated, and I don't understand fully. And at the same time, I want to take action, and I can get paralyzed. And when I walk through this top-down view, what do I do about it? And so this is how I get detangled. And so this is, to me, where this talk track is the source of a lot of tangles and a lot of challenges. So I'm going to lean into the previous work on landscape layers. And what I do when I get tangled is I reflect back on this and think about, how am I plugging in, and where am I perhaps having translation challenges, or, where am I not tracking? And the interesting thing about this is when I get a request or see a scenario play out, I see a lot of these layers all at once now. And also I see how they're interrelated, but it's hard for me to explain. And then also I see where the lower it gets, the fuzzier it gets, which is where I tend to focus. And one of the things that we started working through is, and started thinking about as I'm trying to detangle myself is remembering that this is hard. Not a lot of people are doing it. And also there's this gap between strategy and tactics, and we're trying to fill that gap. We're trying to fill a gap with something else as an alternative to the status quo. And that means it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be different. It's going to be changing. And it's, having comfort in that, embracing that as a reality and a constraint, so to speak. And I used to, say, well, where does stratocution start and where does it stop? And what layer is the stratocution layer? And I realized that, there's not a lot of hardcore delineation here. It's more of a, continuum that, tactics are at the bottom, strategies at the top. It's this blend. And how do these blend? That's critical. And over time, we've developed an approach at growth enablement to sort through these layers. And we have ingredients in these layers that I can lean into to help me reground myself top down. So when I get tangled, what I do is I take this out and I go through what's my understanding of the ecosystem, what's my understanding of the entity, the process. And I realize I don't have a lot of those details. Usually I'm making way too many assumptions, and I don't have enough from the top down in my verbal talk track to even articulate it. But what I can do is think about it, our team, right? And our team, what is our team ecosystem? What is our team entity? What is our team process? What are the different departments in our team? What's our charter, mission, approach, right? So when I say our team, I mean growth enablement. And there's the research that we do, there's the selling that we do, right? So I try to make this accessible for me instead of thinking about it in terms of, a Fortune 20 company or whatever, which has more complexity. But we have tools that have been developed that I re-look at. So I have this layering view that I've been working on in my Evernote to try to figure out how do these types of things kind of snap together. And this is at the current understanding, right? I know we're going to tackle the ecosystem with go to market to go to customer, message, messenger, audience, brings together entities, right? Because this is the idea of the audience is in another company or a partner or whatever. The process we follow is model, map, match. That's the high level process. And then what happens after that? And so I've just been working through is like, what is productitis? Is that an individual thing or is that a departmental challenge? And to me, productitis is a departmental challenge, and commercial ratio helps illuminate this view. The system, the entity, the process, and the departments are not optimal. Then it becomes, well, if this is the strategy, what is the way in which we operationalize that? We have to operationalize or engineer valuable sales conversations and launch initiatives to tackle that. This is where I get the most tangled is what are our what does it mean for us on our team to engineer valuable sales conversations for Catalyst? How do we create value for him? And then what are the initiatives that are coming that I can plug into and add value in? And then am I orchestrating, which is the approach, people, process, information, technology? Like, what is that? What does that even mean? And then how do I activate others? That team alignment, cohesion, galvanization, having cohesion there. And maybe that's what that should be, but am I tapping into the team? And then what's my role? And then am I using my time wisely, right? So all of these come into play for me in a lot of situations. It happened to me yesterday. Catalyst asked me and said, hey, why don't you do a detangler on X? And his ask, right? I'm like, dude. So here, I'll read it to you. So I don't get a lot of orders for detanglers, right? It's not like I have a ding ding order in, but I got an order for a detangler, right? And he goes, hey, detangler, I need you to, it'd be really cool if you took the opportunity and demonstrate teaming. Use tomorrow's detangler to demonstrate teaming. And remember, you've worked on 80 detanglers. He said 70, but it's 80 now. How do I use what I've been working on and put it into action? And I'm like, okay, what is that? Is that a task, or is there something else here? And how do I approach that? And also, I don't want to get into solutioning. So what is the ask, right? And so I use this to try to think it through. And when I do that, I end up with a view, which is, from a top-down perspective, this view is clearer to folks like Catalyst or maybe Activator, who are engaged in the client view. My view of what I work on is a series of providing inputs, observations, see slides, responding to detangler order. So what are these, and how do these interrelate? And am I clear on what the mission is? And can I leverage this to create a mission or to contribute to the mission? And then can I orchestrate it, and then activate the team members, and I'll be in my role. So this view down here is where I struggle the most. And there are a lot of challenges I have in getting plugged in there. So how do I go about detangling myself, right? That's the challenge. So in that, when I break it down, there's individual and organizational view. Oops, let me I like the pyramid better. Hang on. Okay, so back to like this pyramid better because it blends. But there's organizational and individual challenges here. And what I've recognized in the series of the 80 detanglers or more that I've done is that the detanglers and where I have the trouble is plugging into the organizational view and plugging into the top-down view. And a lot of my the reason why I'm a detangler is there's a need to plug in to the organizational view and to unleash my skills down at the bottom. So and that's what I would hope is the value of detangling, is getting people plugged into the right thing and using their strengths and their abilities, right? So this view of there's organizational challenges and there's individual challenges plays out over and over again. So what's my role and what's my scope? Do I tackle organizational challenges, which Catalyst calls organizational drag, which is a big symptom of that is productitis? Or is there a individual challenge, which I call Tangles, which have to do with what he calls behavior weight. So back in the Forrester days, he built this view, this model, which is there's organizational drag and behavior weight. I've always been focused on this idea of behavior weight, but I didn't really know what it was until I started going through the process of unpacking all this stuff. So what is the difference? Well, I view an organizational drag piece as, an organizational constraint that impacts experiences. I don't know if that's how Catalyst would define it, but that's I'm trying to keep it simple view. So if anything is an organizational constraint that impacts experiences, that's not necessarily my role that I want to focus on. That could be somebody like architect. But from my perspective, how do we lighten up the behavior weight? Well, that has to do with this idea of interpersonal disconnects that prevent action. And I've had a lot of interpersonal, thousands of them. I mean, I've taken a huge inventory, and this is quite a journey, and I'll save it for the other detangler, where I talked about my learning by doing detangler. But what I went through when I was doing a lot of this work is there's a difference between personal disconnects and interpersonal disconnects. And a lot of the focus that I had was on me. How do I get plugged in? Where this is about we, how do we get plugged in? What's my role in helping we get plugged in? So interpersonal disconnects have to do with not my own understanding, but my understanding of the the impact we're trying to create and what we're trying to do together. My individual view is needs to align to what we are trying to do for our mission and what we're trying to do for our impact that we're trying to have, which goes back to, am I plugging into the mission, right? Am I plugging into the mission? So that mission view, the approach, the mission, and the team is more about we. My actions were more about me, and this is my job and this is about me. But what happens as I become more aware, this actually becomes about we, and this also becomes about we. This becomes a fertile soil for tangles to unwire those. And again, a tangle is a interpersonal disconnect that prevents action. So zeroing in on that, what have I done, right? So let me just walk through what I do to try to get detangled. There's a lot of complexity and challenge that we use go to market, go to customer, and that has its own challenges. There's a lot of people have a lot of challenges in understanding that. There's an economic value in what we're doing. This is proven out by how customers respond to salespeople. Organizations aren't set up to help salespeople be successful. People write checks, markets don't. The symptoms of that are productitis. We can measure productitis. The way we tackle productitis is message, messenger, audience, because it's about a communication process. When it comes to executing that communication process, we have to think about enabling the ecosystem and enabling the individual within that. Oops. So I just realized that that's a typo. This is enable the individual or the system. Sorry about that. And the way we do that is with conversations. To help myself be successful, I have to think in terms of strategy and tactics, because that's what Stratacution is. I have to blend both. If I default to one or the other, I won't be as successful, but there's a lot of challenges in that, and doing the right thing today to accomplish the objectives tomorrow. That means I need to operate in this box of doing both, and it's largely void. The space here creates a lot of ambiguity, and the speed at which we're working creates a lot of volatility, and that we hope to tackle with orchestration. The orchestration that we do is to get companies to align and also people to align. And to keep it simple, the people view and the company view, we have pretty much two views of. There's the between companies view, model, map, match, and between the people view, we have encode, transmit, decode, right? So this is how I roll through this wrap. Remember these things as I try to get detangled. And then I say to myself, well, how am I doing on decoding? How am I doing on encoding and transmitting, right? Because this is my space of the interpersonal dynamics and the interpersonal challenges. Based on that, I think through that there's a lot of perspectives there, and the perspectives of doing the right things and doing those things right create a lot of friction. And in that friction zone, it happens at a lot of different levels. And there's two types of friction. And at those levels, what we're trying to stratacute, there can be tangles and there can be behavior weight. That's a tangle view. And we also have organizational challenges that come up as we try to evolve. We are evolving the commercial ecosystem. We are driving change. All of these layers are in flux. All of these layers are changing. I have to recognize that all of these are in play. And there's two ways that friction surfaces: the individual friction and the organizational friction, as we're driving those changes. And that means I need to stay disciplined. Am I tackling organizational drag, or am I tackling behavior weight or tangles? I'm tackling and looking at and very curious about what are tangles. So how do I do that? So that's the source of tangles, but what are they, right? Tangles are friction, interpersonal friction that creates a challenge in execution. So what is that? And the tangles can come from three places. Am I accurate with what I'm doing? Am I precise and disciplined in what I'm doing? And am I meaningful in what I'm doing? And each of these are a litmus test on how well I'm aligned. In other words, am I making things digestible? Am I being empathetic? And am I doing something that allows us to take action today? And there are tangles in the way of doing that. And that's the overall symptoms of being tangled, is not being digestible, perhaps being too academic. Am I being empathetic? The symptom of having too many tangles or having tangles there is I'm tone deaf. And if I'm not actionable enough, if I'm too perhaps in the review mirror, or perhaps too documentation oriented, it's not actionable. So that if I have tangles that get in the way, this is what it looks like. But I need to be able to trust the team to tell me when I'm not digestible or not apathetic and not actionable, which our team does a good job at. Unfortunately for me. No, just kidding. uh, anyway, it's fun. So what do tangles sound like? Well, I've had all these tangles. Remember, this detangler that we're in is about where do these tangles come from, and what does it sound like? How do I give an identity to these? Well, I've said all these myself for a long time. When I'm experiencing something new that I don't understand, I can end up in a space of I can't do it. I didn't get the inputs I needed. I can't bring it up. I don't have the support I need. I don't know if what I did was good or helpful. I don't know how to leverage others. I didn't do it right. I didn't know what I needed to do next. These are all real life situations that have panned out. And according to the team and others that I've talked to, these are highly valid tangles, and they turn into knots over time the longer they go on. It's not my problem. I'm not getting what I need. I'm not putting myself out there. I'm not seeing how I'm helpful. I'm not doing it right. I'm not sure what to do next, right? All of these things turn into knots if these tangles continue to actually continue. So what I do is I try to give my knot an identity, right? Is my knot related to doing the right things? Or is my knot doing, related to how I do those things right? And I'm not exactly sure if these are 100% right, but these are the knots or the tangles, the domains of where these things end up. In other words, I don't have empathy. I'm tangled up around the empathy. I'm tangled up around the environment, the service to others, and the service I'm supposed to be getting, what it means to make progress, what it means to contribute, be creative, use my skills, and then work together. Each of these are not that prevent me from being locked in on what to do and how to do it. The what and the why, depending on how we look at it. And for example, a scenario might play out where maybe I'm sure I can do that, or I'm not sure I can do that is not a problem. It's green, and I can score these things out. I can say, look, I'm seriously struggling with this. Isn't my problem, or I don't get how this works. I'm stuck. But maybe I score out these other things and I'm okay. If I put a red, green, yellow on here, I've got I need to sit back and think about these red ones, and I've got to figure out how to tap into the team, have empathy more, and figure out how to make progress. If I don't know how to make progress, I'm going to lash out. I'm going to end up in a bad spot. How do I turn all these to green and get detangled? And the more green I have, in theory, the more plugged in I am. So I take an inventory of which tangles show up and why and how, right? And I try to understand each. And the reason for that is what I've learned from myself is the longer a tangle goes unresolved, the more it impacts how I show up. When there's unresolved tangles that become knots, I can either fight or flight. And if I'm engaging aggressively or withdrawing and isolating, that's a problem. So, and maybe this is the wrong word. Maybe this is, whatever the fight word is, it's fight or flight, and if I don't resolve my tangles, these are the 7 major problems I have. I look for blaming people. I criticize others. I get angry. I try to control or dominate. I check out. So I stick around, but I don't quit, but I check out. I get super defensive. I live in the past, and I just flat out deny it. And what I've learned is if I feel any of these seven, or if I think of any of these seven, all of these equal anxiety or depression, right? Which is the other detangler I did. Anxiety is living in the future, getting sad or depressed is living in the past. So these are early warning systems, these seven things to let me know if I'm in the present. And in the present, if I feel these things, that's a good thing, and I can work to resolve them. If I don't, I'll end up with anxiety or I'll get sad, right? So this is a whole the other detangler I did on this. So that's what that means. So what do you do with these, right? So this is where tangles come from. This is what tangles look like. This is my identification of tangles and how I've used tangles. So what have I done with them? Well, where does this resolve to is a key question. If I think about what journey I'm on, the journey that it naturally resolves to is moving from me to we. I've already shared a little bit about that, but my struggle has been, how do I do this stuff up here? That's not the low-hanging fruit. The low-hanging fruit is getting plugged into the team. So if I'm struggling with this down here and I'm tangled, the first place to get untangled with is myself. The next place would be team. So how do I get untangled enough to plug into the team and not worry about fixing the whole ecosystem? In other words, if I can't fix myself, so to speak, and I can't plug into the team, then it's not worth fighting or worrying about the rest of the ecosystem. Start with what I can do, which means I need to think about what my biases are, think about what the team needs, and be aware of these friction points. If it's organizational or individual, and if it's individual, what can I do about it? And then as I talk about in detanglers, I have an ability to choose my response. If I am focused on understanding what my tangles are, then who resolves the tangles? Is it about me or is it about somebody else? And this is the accountability part. I have the ability to choose my response to this situation. I can wait for somebody to tell me what to do, or I can actually engage in active learning. So what that means is there's things that I need to continue and there's things I need to stop. And when I think in terms of start and stop and continue, I want to start and continue to learn by doing and activating myself and being aware of what I'm learning in the moment and stretching and exploring and playing and improving by trial and error, and test with experiences in the now, right? I want to be in the present now. And what I need to stop doing to untangle myself is knowing by proxy. I read a book once, or I read a research paper, or somebody else tells me what to do, or I generalize based on a previous data point or experience, or I live it out of my comfort zone, or I'm regurgitating how to do something, or I basically acquire new knowledge and thump people on the head with it, or I test people and try to stump them on what they know or what the lexicon and language is. And these things on the right are oftentimes what people get certified on. So it's very passive, and that's a whole other story. But that's not in the now. This is in the past, and in many organizations, this is 100 years in the past here. So that's very passive, and it reinforces getting more tangled, because more tangled is what got us here. Tangles are what got us to this situation. This stuff on the right got us to where we are in the commercial ecosystem. So that's why tangles are critical. And the way in which I do that is I need to observe, learn, and create. And that helps me get untangled, which is a whole separate detangler as well. So why go through detangling myself? Well, I think it's made me faster, not fast enough, but I think I'm faster. I think I'm more flexible. I think I have a broader perspective. I think I have more empathy, accountability, and I feel more interconnected. I feel these things, but ultimately it's up for others to decide. But I know I've been through a process of change. So that's where tangles come from for me. And that's the source of many tangles and how it relates to this idea of working together, and why I think that the idea of tangles, the more I can make it clear, the more we can remove some of the behavior weight as we're changing. which means we have to do that through the experiences we create. And that ties us back to our principle. It's the experience, stupid. All of this was figured out and tried to figure out through doing. The idea of doing the detanglers, the idea of trying to be put on the spot. How would you explain tangles? What the hell are they? And this is my attempt to answer that. And look forward to any feedback. Sorry this was later today. That's a whole other story in and of itself. But I look forward to your feedback. Thanks.